The Vatican and Pope Francis impose further restrictions on the traditional Latin Mass. Why is the ancient liturgy still being targeted? Catholic Thing contributor Monsignor Charles Fink weighs in. And why is the Vatican's communications chief defending disgraced Jesuit Marco Rupnik's artwork? Dr. Liz Lev is here to share her thoughts. And Duck Dynasty CEO Willie Robertson joins me to talk about his new book and everyday evangelization. And Iran's nuclear enrichment program is expanding. What danger does it pose? And what's the current state of the conflict in Gaza? Newsmax contributor and foreign policy expert Dr. Walid Phares is here. The World Over begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me an X post. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Lots to cover tonight. Reports surfaced this week that yet another Vatican document further restricting the traditional Latin Mass is being readied for release. According to independent Vatican journalist Diane Montagna, sources say it has the backing of Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin and has been submitted to Pope Francis to review. Now, we have not independently verified this story, but all of this follows Pope Francis's motu proprio, Traditionis Custodes, which severely limited the celebration of the traditional Latin Mass about 2 years ago. Here to discuss what could be coming and why, I'm joined by a priest of the Diocese of Rockville Center, New York, and contributor to thecatholicthing.org. Monsignor Fink, thank you so much for being here. You wrote a piece this week in the Catholic Thing titled "No Mercy for Latin Mass Lovers." In your column, you write that you're a former Episcopalian, you are not a TLM promoter, and certainly not a denier of the validity of the Novus Ordo. I mean, you've been celebrating that Mass throughout your priesthood, close to 50 years now. Monsignor, what do you make of the hostility that the Vatican and Pope Francis seem to have for this perfectly valid form of the liturgy, the traditional Latin Mass? And what have you observed from the community in your diocese who embrace it?
Well, that's the $64 question, isn't it? What the heck is going on? Why the terrible hostility? Why, this belligerence towards a group of people who are largely just devout, practicing Catholics who find that the traditional Latin Mass nourishes them in a way that they don't find that the Novus Ordo does. So I have good friends, priests and lay people who are in that boat. First of all, there's certainly nothing doctrinally wrong with that Mass. That couldn't possibly be the case. It was the Mass of the Church for so many centuries. So it can't be criticized for that. And on practical terms, in a church that's, well, I don't want to say desperate, but I'll use that word, desperate to attract people, to attract people, especially young people. I've been a priest.
Well, Monsignor, we've got the Diocese of Baltimore shuttering half of their parishes. You've got the same situation up in Cincinnati. When you're seeing that kind of collapse, if you have something attracting young people, and you nailed it. You go to the Latin Mass, there are young families, there are filled with children, and on top of it, you get the artiste types and urbane types that otherwise might not be drawn to a Catholic liturgy. The question is, and what we all should be considering is, what is drawing them? Why are they coming to this? I think it's a reaction to the culture around them that has discarded tradition and the eternal, and here you find it in stark relief. And there's that element of the mystery in the traditional Latin Mass that I have to say, it's more tangible there than perhaps in some of the Novus Ordo iterations. I'll give you a reaction to that.
Yeah, fair enough. Certainly that's what you just said, I think, is precisely what any of these young people would say. And And so it's a bit of a mystery to me. You don't like to try to, only God can read minds and hearts. But, being human, you can't help try to figure out why this hostility. And I really don't get it.
Monsignor, as if Traditionis Custodes were not restrictive enough, this purported new document would, according to sources, prohibit all priests, other than those belonging to the TLM orders and institutes and societies, from offering Mass in the old rite. It also would prohibit bishops from celebrating or authorizing the traditional Latin Mass in their own dioceses. So I guess my question, Monsignor, is Pope Benedict issued Summorum Pontificum, which permitted wider use of the TLM at the discretion of the priest. And for years, the Old Mass and the Novus Ordo existed side by side. Peace had been established in a church with multiple liturgies, the Melkite, the Maronite, Coptic, Chaldean, countless others. Why is this particular liturgy anathema in Rome?
I wish I could give you a good answer. It is a mystery to me. And again, I wish I could read some of their minds. The reasons they give don't impress me. I don't, as you say, we already have multiple rites, and beyond multiple rites, we have multiple expressions of liturgical piety because of all the different ethnicities we serve.
Right.
You could go to two Novus Ordo masses and find them very, very different. One more subdued, one people practically dancing in the aisles, and but that's not a source of disunity. But having a Latin Mass is a source of disunity. I don't get that. And the whole nostalgia argument, I don't think these young people are.
No.
I don't think that's their motive. They never experienced it back in the day.
Right.
I think they're searchers, and they look around and they experience this, and it moves them in a way that we should be very grateful for.
There are more people now in that 18 to 25 age group identifying as nones, having no religious affiliation. If this is an attraction to them, if they're fascinated and drawn to the depth and the mystery of the faith, why not make it available? And as you say, on a practical level, we could get rid of the multiple language masses being offered by the one poor priest in the parish. He could do a Latin Mass and have the Hispanics and the Polish and the whoever come in, and everybody can understand the same Mass. You can read it in your book. I have to say, one of my vivid experiences with my family, we were traveling in Paris, and to go to that Latin Mass in Paris and be surrounded by people from all over the world, and you're still unified. There is power in that. And I think the church is throwing away one of its great gifts if we outlaw this in the way that we're moving. Monsignor Charles Fink, thank you so much for your time. And as a side note, head of the Workers' Party in the UK, George Galloway, a progressive, recently met with the Pope, and he told the Telegraph that during his meeting with Pope Francis, he urged him not to ban the traditional Latin Mass and told him it is poetry in motion.
Right. Yeah, I hope that saner heads will prevail, but it doesn't look good right now.
Thank you, Monsignor.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. God bless you.
He's a businessman, entrepreneur, star of the popular reality TV show Duck Dynasty. He joins me to discuss what ails American culture today and how a little bit of everyday evangelization might be the cure. He's CEO of Duck and Buck Commander and the author of the new book, Gospeler, Turning Darkness into Light, One Conversation at a Time. Please welcome to the program, Mr. Willie Robertson. Thank you for being here, Willie. Look, before we get to the book, Gospeler, I want to get your take on what I mentioned in the intro. Our chaotic American culture. Look, this society is noisier and I think more frenetic than ever with cell phones and social media and all the ever-changing and evolving technology. Pew's survey tells us that belief and the attendant church attendance that accompanies it is at an all-time low and getting lower. Willie, how is social media and the noise making it harder to reach people with a message of hope, particularly the gospel.
Yeah, I agree with your statement. I do think it's noisy, and I do think there's there's a lot of negativity flowing out there. One of the chapters in the book is called Hope Yeller, and it's I think our calling is more for good news and hope. I think a lot of believers think that their calling is to let everyone else know how bad things are, and I get it. Like we see it, but we don't need everybody just literally spewing all the stuff of what they see. I mean, there's things to debate and fix, and as a country, but I think we need more hope, and we need more positive news and something ideas that can work. And that's really the idea of the book. It's not just to spew the negativity, because I think believers get thrown into that. It's like, oh, they're just as bad, and
Right.
the whole world's going to end. That these are the end times. This is so bad, and so sometimes I think we lack the good news, which is the gospel. That's what it means, and we lack where the good news and where that hope is.
Well, Faith and Family was the bedrock of your iconic series, Duck Dynasty. What, in your estimation, made it so popular and kept it on air for 11 seasons? I mean, it had to be feeding viewers something that they wanted and needed. What was it, in your estimation?
I think it was a combination of things, and I think you just had a lot of things come together with that show. Because you got to remember, at the beginning, when we were talking about making the show, we were talking about doing a reality show that had no fighting and no cursing and no nudity, and a family that was going to get along, that was going to end with a prayer, which I never dreamed that would have even went through, and not only did it work, it went all the way to the top, as the most watched unscripted show in history. I think it was, the faith was important, for sure. I also think it was a 3-generational show, so everyone could sit around and watch it together. And that's rare to have a show that, mom, dad, and the kids and grandparents can all watch. And I think it was funny, and funny is hard. And that too, being in the business, like, it's hard. Most of the stuff we watch is not that funny, or it's only funny to a few people, or it gets dirty to be funny. And so I think you just had this genuine comedy and humor, and people just love that. They love just being able to sit back for 30 minutes. I know this because they've told me that, and they just get a chance to laugh and kind of enjoy this, and didn't get hit with everything else. And I think that's harder to do. I mean, think about like late night comedy, which is essentially gone, right? I mean, we just don't have any. It's so hard to find something that you can just laugh at and laugh together.
No, it's filth and politics. That's what late night has become. And it used to be kind of fun, witty, urbane observations, But what you all did, you're right. It was slapstick. It was loving. It was loving. You had a family that was doing this together, and even when there was disagreements or silliness that happened, everybody came together in the end. You not only ate together, you prayed together, something that, by the way, one of the most successful scripted shows at CBS, somebody was watching your show, Willie. At the end of Blue Bloods every week, they do the same shtick. Which is not lost on me. The family comes together and prays and again, unifies. Somebody got that memo, and it's a good one. Look, we've been hearing about youth revivals all across the country. Mass baptisms, renewed interest in faith. In the Catholic world, we're a few weeks away from a big Eucharistic revival taking place in Indiana, and there was this incredible procession of tens of thousands of young people in France, pilgrimaging for days to go pray. Willie, there are a lot of young people obviously searching for purpose of meaning in their lives. Will that hunger drive them back to faith, perhaps the faith they left behind, particularly when the culture and the public education system seems to be keeping them away from those traditional values and away from religious practice?
Right. I mean, I think we all hope that's the case. And I did want to step back on what you said about the family prayer at the end of the show. But I'm going to tell you something else that really was lost is just the eating together. Like, that has become so rare. People don't sit together as a family and eat. Everything is takeout and fast, and and so it's just different. So even the time, like, we realize, wow, just that time of we put the cell phones down and we're just having time as a family. I think that's important as well, which can lead to the other as well. I think when the family breaks down, that's when, obviously the societies break down. There is this hunger, and there's this perhaps it's a maybe a vision of the bad, and so you're starting to see people move towards the Lord, and generally a lot of times youth have always been the beginning of the start of something, and so and hopefully it doesn't have to get so bad and so painful, because we know that can also pull people to faith as well. I think about 9/11. You had more people probably in church the next Sunday, and they're starting to gravitate because you're starting to lose some of these ideas that you've built on. And then coming out of COVID, certainly a lot of things were completely lost. People's careers and their identities and everything they thought was up, and now it's down. And so I think we are seeing obviously the residuals of a lot of that pain and damage that had happened. And so we do need answers, which is why I wrote the book. It was like, through these conversations, and I just go back to the Bible, I talk about those conversations and what they were like, particularly in the book of Acts, and then the conversations that I've had with people as well. And I start the whole thing starts with the conversation that someone had with my father 50 years ago. And you had a family that was over. We made a movie about last year called The Blind, and so the family split up. It looks like a disaster, and then a man got in his car, drove to a bar, and shared the gospel with my father. And it was really the last hope. It was the only thing that could potentially save his life and this marriage. The marriage stays together. This is a young couple with 3 little boys. They stay together as a family. Then the business comes. Later on, the TV show comes. Now I can look up, and literally hundreds of millions of people have been touched in some way by the gospel. And I can trace that back to that one conversation. I think, what if that wouldn't have happened? It completely changed the whole trajectory of my life and my whole family's life. So I'm appreciative looking backwards, but I'm thinking, well, who can I talk to that could potentially change their lives, change their marriage, change their children, their grandchildren? You're talking about generational change that can happen, which is why I wrote the book, and that's why I started with that, just because I'm so appreciative, because people have said, like, oh, we're so glad you didn't lose your faith, by doing a TV show, but we feel like everything we have is based on the faith. Like without that, we would have had nothing. We would have been just another statistic, a split up family, and who knows where we'd be.
Yeah, and it really came from Phil Robertson, your father, accepting that message and embracing it and going back to the family. In gospeler, and that term, you describe that term in the book as follows: a gospeler is exactly what I've always aimed to be. The word is defined simply as a person who zealously teaches or professes faith in the gospel. As a follower of Jesus, I believe we are all called to be gospelers. How did you first become a gospeler, and how does one practically do the same?
Well, I'll give you one little funny. That's a real word. I say gospeler. I know you're from South Louisiana, so you can say it.
Yeah, see, we got to hit the wrong syllable. You know how that works.
I know how you boys from New Orleans are. So Corey found the word. I was writing this book, and she said, "Willie, I found this word, and it's so cool." And she told it to me, and I was like, "I love that word." And so it used to be known, like, everyone used this word, and now it has gone in our culture. It's just like a dinosaur word, which is, doesn't, it makes me think it's a little ironic. I think that a lot of people don't share their faith. And it's not just the idea of like a pastor. These are like just regular people. They were called known gospelers or known gospelers. And that's what they did. They just went out and shared their faith. So me not being a pastor, and I thought, well, that's the perfect word. And perhaps we can get this back in the culture. For me, I was, and I share that in the book, where I was young. Like, I was young and shared my faith. Even in, I think my first one was in like grade school. I had my Bible, and I would share my faith with people. I was modeling after what I saw my mom and dad do, and so I did see them just talk to hundreds and hundreds of people. And once you kind of become known for that, people will bring people to you. They'd be like, they'd send them down to the river. It's like, maybe you can go talk to Phil, and he can talk some sense into you. And so he'd go out there in that old muddy river and baptize people all the time. And so he really became known for that. And so as kids growing up, we did the same thing. And I wanted to capture that and say, what does it work? Because what I find is they disqualify themselves from sharing their faith. Or they're thinking, well, that's someone else's job, right? That's, or I don't know the Bible well enough, or that's not my gift, or I'm shy. And I try to make the case in the book that when Jesus gave the Great Commission, it was to everyone. And so if you're talking about, making disciples and baptizing people and teaching people, all these things come from conversations that you have. And these are regular, common people. These weren't like in the book of Acts, they're called regular, ordinary, unschooled people, and that's how their peers saw them. And so I think it's on all of us. And I make cases like, I would talk about my wife, right? I mean, I wouldn't be, nervous about mentioning my relationship with my wife and all that. And it would be strange if I told her, I said, well, it's not my gift, so I'm not going to mention you to anyone else because I'm not good at it. And she would probably have a problem with that if I took that approach.
Yeah, I think so. And you may have a dislocated nose from a pan across the face. But look, the subtitle of the book, I think, is important. Turning Darkness into Light, One Conversation at a Time. And I mean, you referenced it there a moment ago. I think a lot of people think evangelization is something done in church. You're talking about something quite different on a smaller, more intimate scale. And, as I read the book, I kept thinking of that line from St. Francis of Assisi, who said, "You are the only sermon most people will ever hear today." Talk about, and you mentioned it about your father becoming kind of an example to you. And you kind of answered my question, because I thought the example, the acting on the Word of God is as important as repeating it and conveying it. Because people only come to you if you're immersed in the Word, if you're alive to it, and truly an example of a Christian disciple.
Yeah, I think you can say a lot before you ever open your mouth just by your kindness. John chapter 4, I write about that, the chapter called Storyteller, where Jesus runs into a woman at the well. It's someone he shouldn't be talking to. They're not from the same region. And incidentally, he starts this, I think we think it can be so complicated. That conversation started with Jesus said, "Can I get a drink of water?" And so if you can ask someone for a drink of water, you can be a gospeler. And that ends with the whole village coming to know Jesus, and it started right there. So she was one of the earliest people that took this encounter with Jesus and then took it back to her village and shared with other people. That's as simple as it can be. And this isn't, I think church, the idea of a meeting, I don't even call it church. I mean, church, we are the church. So it's like, but when we do get together in bigger settings, it's probably, for me, it's probably one of the least places I even have a conversation with anyone. Generally, we drive there, we walk in, we sit, we listen, and then we leave. And so there's not a lot of conversation. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying there's usually one person talking. So, like, I'm a business guy, and so I think about things differently. Like if I'm selling a product, and I go to a place, and let's say there's a building with 1,000 people in it, and there's one guy talking to the 1,000 people. If I wanted to get the word out about my product, would I take the one guy on the stage, or would I take the 1,000 people that are going all out into the community, into their workplaces and all that? I'll take the 1,000 every time to spread the word of Jesus. And I think that's what he was doing when he empowered his people to do that. Then he leaves, and then they go out and spread it. We know it worked because we're still talking about it 2,000 years later. We're still talking about the same story. So this book is for the church. It's for the people. It's for you to get some ideas and say, hey, how could I do this? How could I start this? The Bible says always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. And so part of my preparation is I got to get in the Word. I got to know it. And incidentally, I only have like 7 passages that I generally share with people. Usually because that's about all that somebody can take in at one point anyway. I'm just like the one with the well. I'm going to talk about their story. Where have they been? so many people have been hurt or damaged, and even the idea of church, like, that scares people to death. Maybe there's a problem. Maybe there's a problem in the past. So I want to talk to them to get through that and see where that leads. And at the end of the day, I'm just planting seeds anyway. God's doing the work, and Jesus is doing the work. And so I'm just there. If it's just kindness, but if I can answer their questions, I will. I want to show them that I care about them. It starts with caring about people. And I think in our society, that's probably the worst thing we're doing right now is we just literally don't care about each other. And I think the internet and everything else makes it worse, because we watch stuff online and we watch people and we go, yeah, now I'm for sure I don't like those people. And so it's just driving people away, and we get real tribal and just in our own camps. And so hopefully we can have some conversations that we can, and it's not shoving it down their throat, and it's not judgmental at all. But it's amazing how we can, if we just sit and talk with people and try to point them. I am looking for change if they feel like there needs to be change, like Zacchaeus. Jesus shows up at his house and he says, I'm changing everything. I'm going to start giving people away. And incidentally, Jesus gave us a big clue right there. He said, this is why I came, was to seek and save what was lost. And so Jesus was telling us, this is what this is all about, which is sharing it with other people.
Willie, I got a minute left. You're really trying to encourage people to become, in your lingo, hope yellers in this book. As you say late in the book, and you're referring to Ananias going to St. Paul. Don't you love getting dragged into other people's problems? But that's really what you're calling us to do here, to get dragged into other people's problems, because we're all together in this.
It's back to caring about people. So, and I know there's a lot of us, even as believers, we're like, man, I've got my life where I want it. I've done the right things. I've made some good decisions. And then, now I got to, mess with that. But if you think about the idea of Jesus and who you're following, that's exactly what he did. So he didn't come for himself. He came for others. And so that is what we're following. That is who we're following. And to follow him, I think we are going to have to get and try to give them the hope and realize we were all there. We were all away from him, and how he can change our lives.
Well, Willie Robertson, always a joy being with you. And whether you pronounce it the Monroe way or the New Orleans way, gospeler, turning darkness into light. Willie Robertson's new book, One Conversation at a Time, is available at bookstores everywhere and online. Willie, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
It was a treat. See you, buddy.
Last October, the terrorist group controlling Gaza unleashed a series of rocket strikes against major cities in Israel. This was immediately followed by a violent incursion of Hamas ground forces. But where do things stand now, and what is next? Joining me with analysis and to talk about the current state of the conflict is foreign policy analyst and co-host of the new podcast, War and Freedom Insight Talks, Dr. Walid Phares. Walid, thanks for being here. Axios reports that Israel and the United States have agreed to reschedule some high-level meetings on the Iranian threat that were canceled after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suggested that Biden and the administration were withholding arms from Jerusalem. Walid, what happened between the U.S. and Israel last week? And did the clapback by Prime Minister Netanyahu change the math here?
I'm not sure if Prime Minister Netanyahu is able to change. What I'm sure about is that there is a majority in Congress, and it's not just in the House, but also in the Senate, and not just Republicans, but some Democrats as well, who are not very happy with the direction the Biden administration is taking towards Israel, towards the Iran regime, and towards the Middle East in general, including our Arab allies. And here's the deal, Raymond. This Iran deal remains the pressure that is forcing the administration not to go all the way in the defense of Israel, of Arab moderates, and of the Iranian opposition. It's the money, the transaction that you and I spoke about for the last many, many years. So at this point in time, when you hear the Biden administration asking for a ceasefire, it's not for the, for the value of peace. It's to protect Hamas, because the Iran regime will cancel the Iran deal and a lot of money will be lost.
So you're saying that this pause, that's what they call it, a pause in May, was due to the U.S. concerns, was not due, rather, to the U.S. concerns that sending more weapons would escalate hostilities or deaths of the Palestinians, but was really related to the Iran nuke deal.
Absolutely. Actually, what is happening now is that the Israelis are encircling the last bastion of Hamas, meaning of the jihadists in Gaza. They have cut off that organization, Hamas, from Egypt at this point in time, and the next stage will be to replace it, to disarm it. And there are Arabs ready for it. There are even Palestinian, Raymond, who are ready to come and constitute a new local government with the help of Arabs and of the Israelis. Who is missing is the United States. If I am the White House or State Department, I'll start already talking with the Arabs, having conferences with Israelis and Arabs and Abraham Accord people to just replace Hamas. No, they are just protecting, delaying everything.
The Biden administration officials this week in Washington told the Israeli defense chief that the pause on the shipment of the heavy artillery and bombs to Israel are under review. And the question is, will shipments resume, in your estimation, or do you think they're going to continue to stretch this out as long as they can because of the pending Iran nuke deal?
Well, you're going to have both happening in Washington at the same time, all the way to our elections, all the way probably to January. On the one hand, you have a very strong, influential, well-funded Islamic Republic lobby, I mean the Iran regime lobby, that is not just a private enterprise. It's actually within the administration. We know many advisors and the negotiators have been pushing for putting so much pressure on Israel to stop pressuring Hamas because, as we said, the regime in Tehran will be opposed and will start cutting the interest for anybody, not just in America, but in Canada, in Western Europe, who have been involved in this, on the one hand. So that's why you're going to see that pressure continue. On the other hand, you have a majority, not just of the Congress, but of the American people. And with it, you have a majority of Arab countries who are telling Washington one way or another. The administration is receiving this directly from Congress. But what they're telling them, we are allies with Israel, as we were allies with our allies during World War II. So what you are displaying, we're going to stop this weapon and not that weapon, doesn't show that we are partners anymore. It shows different things. It shows actually the administration positioning itself in between Israel and the Islamic regime of Iran. That's massive. That's a massive change.
Yeah, well, there's also a chunk and base of the Democratic Party that is opposed to this, particularly in places like Michigan, which also is fueling this kind of yes and no approach, neither there nor here approach, because they don't want to take a position because this pending election is in the offing. Why is Israel held, though, to a different standard, Walid, than, say, Ukraine? Nobody's worried about ticking off Russia or China. We're shipping billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine.
Well, basically, one point about Michigan, I would not let this go. Mm-hmm. It is a misperception to say that a majority of Arabs, Middle Eastern, and even Muslims in the Michigan area, and we know it, we have advised many Middle East American coalitions for the last 10 to 20 years. They are more vocal. Those who are partnering with the Khomeinists of the Iran regime, and we know them, and those who are actually friends or allies of the Muslim Brotherhood have the podium. They have the microphone. But are you going to tell me that the majority of the Lebanese who are opposed to Hezbollah and who are a majority in Michigan, or of the Syrians, or of the Iraqi Assyrians and Chaldeans and others are lining up with Islamists? No. So I think there is a misperception. But having said that, why is Israel treated that way? It's because, unlike what's happening with Ukraine, it's because the lobbying made by the anti-Israel forces in the United States has spread, is now on steroids. It's much larger than it was before. Again, I'll bring it back to the Iran deal. But the lobby that is receiving cash in Ukraine is also very strong. So at the end of the day, my friend, it's money that is talking.
Yep, sadly. Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman expressed support for Israel in a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday. Watch.
Well, we stand with Israel through this, and I'm so sorry for what's been done to this nation, but I'm just an honor to be here today.
Walid, Fetterman expressed support for America's ally Israel, while many in his party do not. Does this signal a shift in U.S. attitude toward Israel, or is Fetterman just acting rogue in his party?
I don't think so. I followed him very closely on socioeconomic issues. He's as firm as he was on the left. He's not going to abandon that. He may not like the conservatives, But what happened with Fetterman and maybe other 2 or 3 other senators who are in the Democratic Party, who are slightly left of center, the shock that happened as a result of the attack on October 7, told everybody, including what I call the liberal left-wingers, that the jihadists will not spare you, will not spare the Israeli left-winger, as they've done in Iran. They killed the members of the Communist Party of Iran. So they understand that. But then you have the other wing within the Democratic Party, within the left wing, who are directly, organically connected to the Khomeinists and also to the Muslim Brotherhood, which are Islamists, by the way, and to this chunk of the international left that has been funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran. That's the difference.
Walid, you referred to it earlier, but it's very important for people to understand the current state of the Iran nuke deal. Where is it now? Last week, the Washington Post reported, and again, we don't cover this stuff. We're worried about what Biden said or what Trump said getting off a plane or at a rally. That's really secondary to these important international affairs that, as I said, get very little attention. But the Washington Post reported an expansion underway at Iran's nuclear enrichment plant, which could allow the regime to accumulate several bombs worth of nuclear fuel every month. After a leaked draft of these Iran plans was initially reported by Reuters, way back on June 13th, the U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller charged the Islamic Republic with expanding its nuke program in ways that have no credible, peaceful purpose, surprise, and vowed to respond accordingly. Walid, one is to ask why. Why is the U.S. so keen on entering this nuclear deal with Iran in the first place? And is it such a surprise that they're ramping up their program?
Well, let me respond to the first very important points that are not even debated or discussed, which are the following. Should it be the State Department or Washington Post, New York Times, and CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of that group, which has been supportive of the Iran deal? When they warn about, in few months, the regime will have access to nuclear weapons, what do you think the next article is about? So let's rush and sign with them and give them the money so that we stop them. This is the logic. It's not, oh my goodness, Iran or the Islamic Republic gonna get to a weapon, let's stop them. Let's actually take out actions against them. That is a very dangerous matter. And the proof, the evidence, is that during past summer, we, meaning the administration, has been sending billions of dollars, have even invented hostage diplomacy. Oh yeah, to liberate 5 hostages, we are paying $6 billion. No way on earth you could do this, because you're encouraging the Iranian regime to do the same. Not very confident that this administration, though they are not raising the specter of re-signing now, of course we are in an election year. If they do it in public, there will be a tidal wave reaction in the election. So they are banking on the fact that they are getting the regime money, little money, warning the American public, oh, we need to get settled with the Iranians, and then you will see in January, if they are if the Biden administration comes back or another similar administration comes back, they're going to go full steam with the Iran regime, unfortunately.
Israelis who were taken hostage, Walid, or lost loved ones during Hamas's October 7th attack are suing the United Nations agency that aids Palestinians. They claim it's financing the militants by paying agency staffers in U.S. dollars and thereby funding them to money changers in Gaza who allegedly give a cut to Hamas. Now, Walid, did the United Nations fund Hamas, A, and what do we know for certain about this situation?
We don't know much about the details, but that corresponds to what's happening in U.S., European, and therefore in UN policies towards these organizations. It's all infiltrated or penetrated or even influenced by the allies of or the supporters of the Iran deal. I mean, we keep going back to the same. Now it's about UNRWA in Gaza because, physically speaking, the Israelis and other Western and Arab countries, by the way, have discovered this. But what about the UNRWA and other agencies of the UN across the region? I mean, in Lebanon, Hezbollah used to be getting aid from U.S. foreign aid, not directly. They will receive them through municipalities, they will receive them through other ways, same in Jordan, same in Syria. The whole situation of Western sent money to the region is to be reviewed, will have to be reviewed by the U.S. Congress and the European Parliament. It's a mess.
It's amazing. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. Walid, as the conflict in Israel and Gaza drags on, the Israeli Supreme Court issued a decision to include ultra-Orthodox Jews in the military draft. Now, the Orthodox Jewish community had long been exempt from military service. How significant is that decision? And does this indicate that this conflict won't be ending anytime soon?
Well, I'll start with the last point. I don't think this conflict is to be ended soon, because to be ended, you need to disarm Hamas, you need to disarm Hezbollah, and you need to have the United States on board. And eventually, at the end of the day, with Arabs and the Iranian opposition, you need to change the regime in Iran. I mean, don't think that there will be a deal with that regime. It's too late to do even a deal because they've gone too far. Problem is, at this point in time, that the administration is not ready to accept this change of policy. That's where the problem is. So they continue with trying right and left to convince the American public that there is a way to deal. And I'm not saying just the administration. There are other people in other quarters of our politics who are saying, oh, yeah, we'll have a deal with the Iran regime. We are way beyond that. The regime is going to fall anyway. It's going to be catastrophic because we are elongating the time. We are stretching the time. So in my view, I think January is going to be the benchmark where things are going to change.
Well, the president of Iran died in that helicopter crash back in May. They're undergoing new elections now. What might that bear out? Is that going to be someone who America can deal with, or is the old anti-Western mentality going to continue with whoever's elected there?
No. What's happening in Iran, or with the former late president, is there was an internal wing struggle. They are replacing him with somebody even closer to Khamenei, the head of the regime, very close to Khamenei. It's imagine as a settlement of scores inside China's leadership. We've seen it during the Cold War, or the Soviet Union, even now in Russia. That is what is really happening. And the more one person or his clique are going to control power, the more they're going to be on steroids, basically, the Iran regime, as we've seen across history. So let's not hope that changes inside Iran are going to get another more moderate regime. You will get a more moderate government in Iran, when the Ayatollahs won't be in power. That's the real benchmark, period.
Yeah. Netanyahu said on Sunday that this war in Gaza was about to enter a new phase. He says the intense stage of the war with Hamas is about to end. This does not mean that the war is about to end, but the war in its intense phase is about to end. Walid, what does that mean? Is there a ceasefire in the offing? I mean, reports say so far nearly 38,000 people have been killed since this conflict began in October.
The ceasefire that Mr. Netanyahu is talking about or thinking about is a ceasefire after Rafah, the last bastion of Hamas, is disarmed. Meaning after Hamas would lose strategic control. There will be cells of Hamas. There will always be cells of Hezbollah and of jihadists. The full victory against terrorism, as we know now, and we've done 20 years of it in Afghanistan, and unfortunately it ended so badly, is when the schools will change, when the classroom is not going to teach any more jihadism. That's the key. On the ground, geopolitically, the Israelis, and they're right in what they say, you could be against them or with them, Hamas has lost control geopolitically over Gaza. So the rest now is going to be who will replace Hamas. That's going to be a big challenge. And I don't see, as I said, the administration working on it. Practically speaking, the next theater is going to be Hezbollah, the Iranian militias in the region, and the regime.
Walid, final question, and I think I've saved maybe the most important to last. While the world is focused on the Israeli-Gaza conflict, we are missing something, I think, infinitely important in the region, and that's Afghanistan. I saw a letter this week from a group called Special Operations Association of America. These are Navy SEALs and Green Berets, etc., and they are sounding the alarm about terror groups gaining strength in Afghanistan and in the surrounding region. What is the situation on the ground, and how did the U.S. withdrawal facilitate the situation?
In a very quick response, I would say this is a disaster in our foreign policy, as terrible as a disaster of the Iran deal. These are the two dragons that we actually brought back to power in the world The regime in Iran is now on the Mediterranean, pounding us, pounding Israel. The Taliban now have gathered all the jihadists under the sun, the jihadists of organizations in Central Asia. They are connecting Al-Qaeda, they have ISIS, and don't believe the stuff that there are contradictions. It's all a game. But what worries me is not just this super gathering of jihadists who are going to explode in Africa and coming to our borders, by the way, through Mexico, etc. All of that, we can talk about it for hours. Why did we transfer power to the Taliban in 2021? Why did we leave weapons to the Taliban and the jihadists? And why are we still, I don't know if your audience understand that, we're sending hundreds of millions of dollars to the Taliban as I'm speaking. So we are near catastrophe in the Middle East with what we're doing in Afghanistan and, of course, in Iran.
Yeah, and in that letter, those special forces warn that the porous southern border in the United States has allowed many of these fighters to penetrate the mainland U.S. That story, that time bomb, Walid, has yet to go off, but sadly, I think we'll be covering it here in the days ahead. Walid Phares, we'll have to leave it there. I hope I'm wrong. Walid's book, Iran, An Imperialist Republic and U.S. Policy, is available now in bookstores everywhere. Walid Phares, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
The Vatican's communication chief, layman Dr. Paolo Ruffini, made headlines this week when he continued to defend his office's use of artwork by disgraced Jesuit Marco Rupnik. Nearly every major feast day, the Vatican's official site features artwork by this once excommunicated artist. Victims are furious, and Ruffini delivered the keynote speech at the annual Catholic Media Conference in Atlanta on June 21st, and he was asked why the dicastery continues to use Rupnik's artwork on its website despite numerous allegations of sexual abuse against the Jesuit artist. Ruffino at one point had this to say: "We're not talking about abuse of minors. We're talking a story that we don't know. Who am I to judge the Rupnik stories?" End quote. Here to discuss, we are joined from Rome by art historian, author of How Catholic Art Saved the Faith, Dr. Elizabeth Lev. Liz, thanks for being here. We discussed this issue back in February, and yet the scandal continues. Your thoughts about, first, Ruffini's choice of words here, despite the known fact that the Jesuits, the order in which Rupnik is a member, expelled him last year. Who am I to judge? I mean, the Jesuits made a judgment, and someone with great power at the Vatican made a judgment and lifted his excommunication. We're talking about a guy who manipulated nuns using art to coerce them into what I'll just describe as debased profanations of the sacraments. It's diabolical. What about the alleged victims of Rupnik who've come forward in recent months, Liz? Do we owe them something? Does the church owe them something? And should an artist and his art be immune from judgment?
Yeah, that's an awful lot there. But my first thought is this:
I know.
and it's a very, very strange thing. It's like the Vatican is having just a bad language month, right? How many missteps have we heard in just 1 month from the Holy Father himself all the way down to this situation? It's like the Vatican has just put its foot in its mouth and cannot seem to remove it. And furthermore, it seems very strange that you have a spokesman who has just taken the line of the pontificate, "Who am I to judge?" The line that was supposed to be this expression of welcomeness and openness of the church, and he's just turned it into a protective cover for a serial abuser. So I just sit there and say, how can you be a spokesman? Like, how is this happening? But I think more to the point, I think really getting down to what's happening here is that once again, this question of Marco Rupnik appears because nothing appears to be happening. And in the midst of Ruffini was his own worst enemy. In the midst of what he was saying, there were some logical statements that the church doesn't delete and cancel. That's not a good way for us to approach art. He said, he talked about Caravaggio, as we have on several occasions. He did say that there is a procedure and the procedure is happening. But unfortunately, those sensible things he said were couched in such incredible callous dismissal of the suffering of these women. How can the church say it's close to these victims of abuse when the Vatican spokesman responds to, well, wouldn't it help to get rid of the art? He says, no, that would not help them, as if he knows what these women need. Furthermore, I do not believe the Holy Father has even seen these women. So I think, again, the problem is that we keep focusing back on this art because the Vatican keeps putting it in front of us, these missiles constantly, instead of thinking about maybe a process of a conversation that would be transparent, where we could have the dicastery for culture talking about things.
Liz, we've reached a curious place when Hollywood, holds themselves to a higher standard than the Vatican. I mean, look, when the Woody Allen accusations went out, just for instance, suddenly nobody wanted to touch or distribute Woody Allen's movies. Actors won't join his cast. He kind of got the bum's rush out the door. In this case, we seem to have someone in the Vatican apparatus, and I've seen reports of a member, apparently, of Father Rupnik's community, who is a member of the Vatican communications apparatus, I guess is partly responsible for the constant push of his work in the face of not only unsuspecting faithful, but the people who feel they have been abused and the victims of Rupnik who've come forward.
I think it's deeply problematic. Dr. Ruffini explained this, that these works of art that keep coming out, they keep being published and used as the Vatican as the backdrop for all of its major public displays, is because they were already in the chute, and they're just waiting for them to finish cycling out. First of all, do you people not have any other artists? I mean, is the imagination of the Holy See limited to one man and one man alone? I mean, I believe there are quite a few other Catholic artists out there that they could choose from.
You think?
And it's stubborn. It feels a little bit like gaslighting. And as you know, I am a big proponent of thinking twice before we take down that art. But seriously, Dr. Ruffini, in his attempt to defend the keeping of the art, he really makes the callousness, that mansplaining, really, it plays against him. So he's not helping the case. I would love to see a committee talk about this seriously in front of us and have some sort of respect for the victims of Rupnik.
Well, this is what I am vexed by, and I'll just say this. We have a synodal approach with everybody coming together and making cross arguments and counter arguments about all sorts of settled dogma, all manner of established church teaching for centuries, but something like this that could bear the synodal touch, where you could bring together artists, victims groups, have a day of conversation with the Holy Father about this. That is a great idea, Liz Lev. I hope somebody there is listening. But look, all of this brings up the issue of the separation of the artist from his or her art, which we've discussed before. Is that even possible now in the case of Marco Rupnik? At this point, with all we know, the guy's currently under investigation. Nothing's moving, but he's under investigation. He was excommunicated and then was unexcommunicated. He was expelled from his diocese and expelled by the Jesuits. Now he's apparently reincarnated to some other diocese. This all reeks of an inside deal.
It seems impossible to us. I know it seems impossible to us, especially those of us who live in the Vatican circle, those of us who be hearing about this story all the time, those of us who see the injustice of these women whose story could barely get told, and Rupnik, who keeps working, keeps being protected. So I do understand that, the idea of this art and the man being completely connected. But at the same time, there are people, I have seen people praying in front of those works that are blissfully oblivious. And if the idea is to leave the time for time to decide, not to react with our immediate rage, knee jerk. This is so wrong. What's happening? We have to get rid of the art, but we have to give time for this settling of both the man, his deeds, and his works, to be able to see it with a clearer and more lucid light. At least that's what I think.
Yeah.
And I do believe that really, if you will, a synodal approach would allow us different voices to be heard, and at least everyone would feel like he or she had been heard at this point.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's two separate issues here. One is the justice for the wrongdoings or alleged wrongdoings of this man. The other is what to do about his artwork. And look, Pope Francis has even spoken positively about Rupnik's mosaics after the scandal was made public, which I want you to speak about the optics of that. But look, I'm going to say it. In my personal opinion, in the opinion of many people, this artwork sucks. And when you have Caravaggio and you got Michelangelo's and you got Fra Angelico's in your garage and in your attic, why would you feature this junk, Liz, in the forefront of every missal that visitors see on the website? Why this and ignore the 2,000-year history of art patrimony that the Catholic Church is?
All right. I think I do have to tell you something that many of Caravaggio's contemporaries said that Caravaggio's art sucks. So if you look at men like Baglioni and Bellori, they were always complaining about his art, saying he wasn't a very good artist. So Caravaggio's been leveled with the same accusation of not being a very good artist. But I mean, more to the point, I think the problem is that the works, this artwork needs time. It needs time to understand. We know that people put those works everywhere. And I was in Malta looking at one of his displays with all of my personal dislike and everything that I know and everything that I've read. But I saw in that space, in that moment, I saw in that space why someone would have commissioned an artist like that. And at the end of the day, looking at works of art like a mosaic, the more that eventually time can separate the man and what he did, and those people, all of those people, he did not put those tiles in place. That is the work of many, many people who put their love, their energy into making something that is, it's luminous, it fills up the space. I don't personally care for the way he makes his shapes, but if we want to get into an art history discussion, there is an element to the simplicity of his work that makes it accessible to many people. I see it every day. I've seen it before this all broke out.
I'm out of time. We'll leave it there. And I love your charity in all of this. I would call it a little simplistic, but that not your analysis, the work. I just think it's modernism at its worst. I think it's simplistic. It looks like a child scribbled it on the wall with tiles. And they're a heck of a lot better mosaic artists. I have seen them up close with my own eyes at the Vatican and certainly all over Europe. But we will leave it there. We'll come back for another discussion. Liz Lev, thank you for the time.
Hi, Raymond. Have a great evening.
And the National Eucharistic Congress is only a few weeks away in Indianapolis, Indiana, July 17th through the 21st. To register, visit EWTN.com/Eucharist. You'll receive a discounted pass. For those of you not in Indianapolis, EWTN will be streaming live coverage of the National Eucharistic Congress beginning July 17th. That is all the time we have for now. We are preempted next week, but be sure to catch us on July 11th. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Have a great Independence Day. Bye now.